Hello, I'm Norman Swan. Welcome to this programme, which today is about eating, and in particular the new Australian Dietary Guidelines. And we're coming to you on the Rural Health Channel. I'd like to acknowledge that this programme is being broadcast from the land of the Wango people of the Darug tribe, traditional custodians of the land and part of the wider Aboriginal nation known as the Eora. And we acknowledge their elders past and present. Now, you're all interested in eating. This is not just a programme for health professionals. Anybody watching can phone up and ask questions, make a comment via phone, text, email or fax. The details are coming up on your screen. You can send your emails to questions@rhef.com.au. You can text us on 0408 408 932 or give us a ring on 1800 817 268 and we'll put you on air. Or you can tweet us using the hashtag RHEF. So make a comment, ask a question anytime you like, and our expert panel will answer them. And let me introduce our expert panel to you. Amanda Jones is an accredited practicing dietitian from Victoria. Welcome, Amanda.
Thank you.
Amanda Lee is Professor in the School of Public Health and Social Work and School of Nutrition and Exercise at the Queensland University of Technology in Brisbane. Welcome, Amanda.
Good evening, Norman.
Carolyn West is a general practitioner from Sydney who specialises in lifestyle medicine and alternates with me on the programme. Welcome, Caroline.
Nice to be here.
And Fiona Smith is an accredited practicing dietitian from Grafton in rural New South Wales. Welcome, Fiona.
Thank you, Norman.
So welcome to you all. Caroline, what do people come into the surgery talking about eating? I mean, we're all obsessed. You're a lifestyle doctor. You tell them just get a hold and go home, or what?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I think more so than ever, people are interested in food and nutrition. But they've got to wade their way through a lot of information out there, some of it sensible and some of it less so. And often their entry point to see a dietitian or a doctor will be all about their weight. So they're interested in enhancing their health, but they're also interested in trimming their waistline.
But they come in, I mean, my impression is people are focused on individual nutrients, the selenium, the antioxidants.
I think that's true. I think that people get very interested in micronutrients, but that's only part of the story. And my approach with people is always about whole foods. And so I try to engage them with this whole concept of whole foods is often the way to go. That the micronutrients are important, but that whole foods offer the whole package.
Fiona, what do you think the biggest myths are that people come in to see you with?
Well, one diet that is particularly popular is low carbohydrate diets, or the Atkins
diet. That's my diet. You're talking about my diet.
Oh,
not
no.
the Atkins, but just low carbohydrate. It's poison, isn't it?
Well, unfortunately, it's completely inconsistent with the dietary guidelines that we're going to be talking about tonight.
All right, well, I'll just leave now then.
It excludes the grains and cereals food group completely. They're an important source of fibre and other nutrients. It excludes fruit. It excludes starchy vegetables. It excludes most of the dairy food group, with the exception of cheese. So really, you're left with high saturated fat, which we're not recommending, low fibre, low calcium, basically not a good diet to be following.
I'm on a certain programme on Channel 10 sometimes, and it always astounds me how little people know about common foods. I mean, we once did a competition on the programme to identify common vegetables, and they couldn't identify what a beetroot was.
Really?
You don't find that. You've got much more intelligent consumers, obviously, in Grafton in northern New South Wales.
Or at least when they come to me, they pretend to be.
They've already been beaten up. They've already been beaten up. Do you find many myths out there, Amanda?
Probably not a huge amount of myths. I think that lots of people, when they're seeing me, they actually try and cover some of their myths, and so it's generally when
you've gone through a bit of a screening process.
Yeah, they sort of they come to light later on as you're talking, and definitely that carbohydrate fear is quite common out there.
No fat fear?
No, I think people are getting more well educated, that they're getting to know what the better fats are, so using mono and polyunsaturated fats, like knowing how to incorporate avocados and nuts and things like that, and avoiding the saturated fats. So I think that knowledge is definitely coming through with my clients that I'm seeing.
Amanda, what went into these dietary guidelines? I mean, why do them? I mean, don't people know what to do? I mean, we're not hearing too strong a mythology here from our panellists.
Yeah, well, the trouble is that there's many papers written about what we should be eating every year. And so the National Health and Medical Research Council every 5 years undertakes to review the scientific evidence that explains not just the foods we need for health, but what we need to do to avoid getting diet-related disease into the future.
I mean, Caroline, to what extent is disease diet related?
I think there's increasing evidence that the links are incredibly strong. So if we look at prevention of the big ticket items, cancer, heart disease, stroke, diabetes, there are very strong links with your lifestyle. So what you eat, how much you exercise, your basic lifestyle package makes an enormous difference to how well you'll live.
So it's not just it's total calories, but it's also what you eat, it's what you consume.
Yeah, the calories thing I think is a bit of a distractor, because I think it's the quality of the food that you eat. So much of our diet these days is taken up with essentially junk foods. And so people might be eating a reasonable number of calories, but the percentage of the day where they're eating snacks, processed foods, on the run meals that are less nutritious is increasingly a problem.
So what did you do with this volume, 50,000 odd papers every year or something like that on nutrition?
It actually took 4.5 years to do this set of guidelines.
Did you read them all?
Oh, I know them all.
Of course you did, yeah. There'll be an exam later.
It's probably a strength and a weakness of the process. Look, there was 50,000 papers reviewed to find the evidence around what
joking.
Australians should eat. No,
My God.
and when you consider that people out there write whole books after reading 3 papers, it gives you an idea of the amount of evidence. So that's exactly why we need the dietary guidelines, because they're a way of translating that very complex scientific evidence into ways that people can understand the foods that we're meant to eat for
So how does it
maximum
differ from the
health.
previous guideline?
Well, there's been a lot of strengthening of evidence. So things like we've got stronger evidence that sugar-sweetened beverages are associated with excess weight gain in children and adults, and that's probably because there's something about taking liquid calories that means we have that in addition to the foods we eat. There's really strong evidence now about the health benefits of fruit. In the past, a lot of research was done into vegetables, and we know that they're associated with decreased risk of most cancers and of type 2 diabetes. But fruit is particularly important, and we know now that every additional serve of fruit we have decreases the risk of cardiovascular disease. And that's particularly important for men, because men don't seem to eat enough fruit in Australia. And then the other really interesting...
Is that you, Norman?
The other really interesting thing we found is, you know, just picking up from what Caroline was saying about the whole foods, when you look at milk and yogurt and cheese, most viewers would probably be interested and a bit surprised to find that the consumption of those foods is actually associated with decreased risk of cardiovascular disease and stroke.
Do we know why?
Well, that's because most of the research that was done in the past took the saturated fat out of those foods and found that it was associated cholesterol. But when you've got all the foods together, the whole dairy food, there's something protective. Something else in the foods. And Caroline and I were talking before, she calls it Factor X. We don't know what it is, but there's something very special about the way that foods interact. And it's probably not surprising that foods really become the most essential variable when we're looking at diets rather than nutrients.
So take us through the structure of the guidelines. How does it, if we go into the website, how does it get broken down? How do we think about it? What are the rules here?
Okay, the rules are, we've got 5 rules. And the first one is about maintaining a healthy weight. So being sure to balance the amount of food that you eat with the physical activity and the other forms of energy that you have. And that can be hard for people to do. To a certain extent, the rest of the guidelines provide an easy prescription for that to happen. So I'll go on to the second one first. The second one is the foods that we need to eat more of. Most Australians don't eat enough vegetables, fruit, whole grain cereals, and that's all sorts of cereals like rice, pasta, breakfast cereals as well. We don't eat enough dairy foods, milk, cheese and yogurt, particularly the reduced fat varieties, and we don't eat enough of meat and alternatives. Now, some Australians, like men, again, poor men, eat probably 20% more red meat than is associated with optimum health outcomes.
And that's associated with colon cancer and heart disease.
It is, but a lot of young Australian women just don't eat nearly enough meat, and so conditions like anemia are prevalent.
I notice in the guidelines you no longer talk about a balanced diet.
No, because our research shows that when you talk to people about balanced diet, they sort of mean half junk and half healthy stuff. What the balanced diet that we're talking about is balancing the food groups, which really should be the most of the Australian diet.
And what's number 3?
Number 3 is the foods we should eat less of. And these are the foods that are associated with adverse health outcomes. And they're the foods that are high in saturated fat, in added sugars, in added salt and alcohol too. So it's easier to talk about those foods in terms of different types of foods like biscuits, cakes, pastries, all those chips and snacks and things that people love to fill off on between meals. The sugar sweetened beverages I talked about, and particular problems there isn't just soft drink, but it's those energy drinks, the vitamin waters, the play waters, a whole plethora of sugar-sweetened drinks are hitting the market now, and then avoiding things like fatty foods such as sausages and wursts and salted foods like that.
And number 4?
Number 4 is promoting breastfeeding. Really important start to life and important to reduce the risk of weight gain in later life. Much stronger evidence about the benefits of breastfeeding now.
And food safety?
Food safety, it's really important because food-borne illness still is a major contributor to burden of disease in Australia. We've really got to learn how better to prepare and store our food safely.
Now remember, if you want to ask a question or challenge us on an aspect, the supplements that you've got in the cupboard, should you be taking them or not, or want to argue the toss that we should be taking them, why don't you give us a call on 1800 817 268, or you can text us on 0408 408 932. So, and you can email us at questions@rhef.com.au. So keep those questions coming in. Caroline, let's go back to the beginning of these, the energy balance, if you like, not balanced diet, but the energy balance. Exercise, what's the exercise equation here? Because it's hard to exercise as much to counter what you eat.
Definitely, and I think that what we're up against is a sedentary lifestyle. So most of us are sitting on our bottoms for a bigger part of the day. We're planning less exercise, so it means that we're probably expending less energy. So even though the amount of energy going in terms of what people are eating, if we track that, often people will only be consuming, say, the equivalent of a chocolate biscuit more per day, but over the length of years, that little chocolate biscuit or the equivalent just adds up to this gradual, slow weight gain. So you just only need small differences in terms of how much you're taking in and how much you're burning off to actually lead to long-term weight gain. Now, if you're looking at exercise alone to be your saviour...
Not going to happen.
Well, it's not usually going to happen. You've really got to focus on your nutrition as well. So a lot of people join a gym and hope that a miracle will happen in terms of their weight. They'll certainly get fitter and healthier, but in terms of losing the weight, you often need to focus on what you're actually putting into your mouth.
Yep. So it's really your get out of jail on a binge day rather than anything else. Amanda, what's your techniques for motivating people to change? I mean, we're asking people actually to take quite a big change, because we'll come to the statistics in a moment, but they're not good in terms of how we all comply with what is a good eating pattern.
The small little changes are the most important things. So making a plan, having something that people can achieve that is relevant to their current diet. So it might be that just swapping from white bread to a wholemeal or whole grain bread, maybe just one small thing that they think, oh, I can do that. And so starting with the small little things can be
So give me the
important.
argument. I move from a white bread to a wholemeal. What's that going to do for me? What's it going to do for me?
It's going to give you more vitamin Bs and it's going to give you a higher fibre. So fibre is going to help fill you up and keep you full for longer. So that will actually mean that you may not end up with that chocolate biscuit at morning tea time.
And it's going to decrease your risk of cardiovascular disease.
So Fiona, I get a bit panicky when I have this sort of conversation because, you know, I think it's only dietitians who stick to these diets. You're all so thin and wonderful, and but you know, I get panicky that my appetite is out of control.
Yeah.
And how do I get it under control? And you're going to tell me to balance out my diet during the day. How do I do this?
The foods that we are recommending will actually fill you more than a lot of the other foods. So as Amanda was saying...
This is your promise to me.
This is my promise to you.
Right.
So the higher fibre foods are going to fill you up, so you're going to eat less of them. So if you start the day with a higher fibre breakfast cereal as opposed to something like, we're not recommending the rice bubbles or the cornflakes, they're low in fibre, they won't fill you up. Something that's higher in fibre, like your Wheat Bix, All Bran, something like that, or wholemeal toast or grain toast, you're going to be full for longer. Hopefully you'll need less morning tea. Once again, we get to lunchtime, if it's a higher fibre food, maybe with some more vegetables or salad. So there's a lot of bulk with very little calories from things like vegetables or salad, so you can eat quite a big volume of those foods without putting weight on.
But on the other side of it, don't we have to relearn how to be hungry? You know, to the extent that you're going to feed me on a regular basis, and we'll come to this diet that not diet, but this meal plan that you've designed for me. But I mean, don't you actually have to learn only to eat when you're hungry?
You want to be a little bit hungry when it comes to meal times, but
not fridge raiding hungry.
Exactly. When you're fridge raiding hungry, you won't be looking for the healthier foods because you'll be going for whatever you can get your hands on quicker. And the other thing is, it takes 20 minutes for your brain to realise that your stomach's full. So within those...
Try an hour.
Yeah. So within that hour, when you're fridge raiding hungry, imagine how many chocolate biscuits you can fit in. So that's not going to be very helpful for weight control.
We've had a question, Amanda, about the GI diet and the extent to which you think through some things like the glycemic index of what you're taking. Because you told me to go from white bread to whole grain. Well, that's also a move down in GI, you know, less sugar going into your blood. I mean, how does this overlay all, or do we not worry about that?
We need to think about the whole foods first. So we need to think about, is it a healthy food choice first? So does it fit within the dietary guidelines? And then, if you want to narrow it down and talk about glycemic index, that's fine then, but you need to sort of start with that starting point. Is it a healthy food first? Because then you're going to get your nutrition from it. So the GI doesn't actually really matter as much when it's a healthy food choice. For example, white potato is a higher GI food, but it comes down to including it in a reasonable portion, and then the GI won't actually have a huge impact. It's about enjoying the whole range of whole foods.
Because there are some paradoxes with GI.
Yeah, look, some chocolate bars will be low GI and some fruit and vegetables will be officially listed as high GI. It doesn't make sense to not sort of use your common sense here and go, actually, if I eat all of these low GI confectionery bars, you know, that's not going to be healthy for me in the long term. And I think we can get very distracted by the labelling, and there's also sometimes a food industry imperative to manipulate some content of the food to actually get it into a category, whether it's sort of going to be into a lower GI category or whatever, just from the point of view of encouraging sales in that item. So I think we have to use common sense with GI. I think it's very useful to look at GI, but I think there's a lot of confusion out there. A lot of my patients go, oh, I'm not going to eat that watermelon, I've read it's high GI. But it doesn't actually affect your blood sugars in a bad way. So I encourage people to forget the GI when it comes to fruit and veg.
Because you're not going to eat watermelon every day anyway.
Well, you're not going to eat the volumes that are going to be required to actually have an impact, and it's a really healthy choice. So I encourage people to look at fruit and vegetables as being these wonderful superfoods.
So does the food pyramid still exist in this new guideline, Fiona?
We've actually got a round plate model now. So it was decided to use the round model because people eat off a plate, so they could relate to that more so than the pyramid.
So let's have a look at it.
Have we got a larger shot?
Yes, well, we'll take it. Yeah,
Here
there we go. The wonders of modern television. We actually just happen to have a larger shot. So talk us through the plate.
Okay, the orange section is the breads and cereals. So
That's the top left.
Top left, yep. So we're recommending about a third of your daily intake come from breads and cereal foods, and hopefully whole grain. So indirectly, the dietary guidelines do actually recommend the lower GI foods, but they're not using the terms GI. They're saying things like the whole grain cereals. And the other, next to that, we've got the dark green section. That's the vegetables. So
Top right.
Top right. So we want about a third of our daily intake coming from vegetables, which would be about 5 serves of vegetables a day, with each of those.
And we'll come back to what serves are in a moment.
No worries.
So it's the opposite of alcohol. It's more than you think.
That's right. Below the vegetables, we've got the light green, which is the fruit. So we want about 2 fruit serves a day. So previously in the pyramid, they used to put the fruits and the vegetables together, whereas now they're separated out, and we want to have more vegetables than we do of fruit.
Yep.
And the remaining third is dedicated, in among the fruit, the remaining third is also dedicated to the purple section, which is the dairy foods. So that would be milk, yogurt, and cheese, hopefully the lower fat varieties of those and the lower salt cheeses. And then in the blue section, we've got our lean meats, skinless chicken, fish, and alternatives such as eggs, legumes, and nuts or tofu.
Can I ask a question there? I noticed that on that plate, in each of the sections, you have a lot of different choices. And what was the thinking behind that? Rather than just putting fruit in one section and veg in the other, it's full of little suggestions.
So that was done on purpose because, you know, Australians come from a vast different cultures, and there's a wide range of eating. These models were really, the new dietary guidelines are made to be more flexible than they were previously. So part of the idea about showing the multiple different choices that people can make within each food group is to support that flexibility, so that there's a wide range of options there for people of all different cultural backgrounds and groups and age and sizes and food preferences. So there should be something there for everybody.
Did you consider recommending just, I mean, we're talking here about eating patterns now rather than individual nutrients. Did you consider just recommending the Mediterranean diet or the Asian diet?
Well, you can actually choose, based on this food pattern, you can choose a diet that some people would call a Mediterranean diet. The problem with the Mediterranean diet is,
there's no one
Mediterranean diet, and you can
we
probably
can have a really good summer holiday trying it out.
There are lots of countries on the Mediterranean. You just pick one, can you? But we know what you mean.
Yes, you could choose 5 different Mediterranean diets within the food groups here. But we also modelled Asian-style eating patterns. So, you know, if you choose the rice and then the Asian-style vegetables here, and the tofus, etc., they actually suit a wide range of cuisines.
So what about, Amanda, processed foods? We are consuming huge amounts of salt, causing high blood pressure. Recent systematic review suggested we could cut stroke risk by 24% just by limiting our salt intake, and if we increased our potassium, which is through your vegetable bit, we would reduce our blood pressure. But it's processed foods we're getting our salt from, isn't it?
Definitely, 75% of our salt comes from processed foods. It's not the salt that not that we recommend salt on the plate or salt in cooking, it is coming through the manufactured foods. So you really need to be mindful of manufactured food, and the new guidelines do have suggestions about looking at labels and trying to reduce the salt.
So what you should be looking at is less than 120 milligrams per 100 grams?
That's a really great choice if you can find that, but the lower the better, because sometimes that's actually quite challenging to find.
And there's also controversy about what is whole grain. So if it says whole grain on the label, it's not necessarily whole grain. This is in processed foods.
Yeah, I would be looking at the list of ingredients. The list of ingredients is really quite useful. It's like a recipe for what is included in a product. And so if at the top of the list of the ingredients, which is the majority of the product, you've got oats or whole wheat, rice, barley, you would be knowing that it's whole grain because those ingredients are. Whereas if the start of the list is saying white flour or those types of products, then it's going to be less whole grain. So looking for whole foods in the list of ingredients.
Now, you've prepared my tomorrow's diet for me.
Yes,
Take me so you're handling my breakfast and lunch.
Oh no.
And midday. Let's have a look.
Breakfast is a really important meal, and often people They're aware that breakfast is needed, but
Can I just interrupt you a second?
Yeah?
I just want to take a call. Bob from Armandale asks, how do you get healthy snacks for kids and adults when so many supposedly healthy snack foods are advertised? Who wants to take this one? Caroline?
Look, I've got kids myself and I know what I'm up against. It's that pester power factor, advertising and trying to run the gauntlet down the supermarket aisle. It's about being prepared and actually thinking creatively about how you're going to prepare fruit and vegetables. I often suggest that families involve their kids with picking some fruits, preparing them in interesting ways, including it with each meal, and having snacks like nuts and low-fat yogurts or low-sugared yogurts.
Cheese and biscuits.
Cheese and biscuits. So actually thinking ahead and providing them with snack food that's actually...
But Mum, you're the only one who ever presides. All our friends get chocolate and all that stuff.
I know. And you've got to push through that. And I think that it's really hard because you're up against a lot of advertising and a lot of lunchbox comparison, dare I say it. So they go to school, they open their lunchbox and, you know, they're crestfallen when theirs doesn't match the others in terms of the contents
And
of
not every
packages.
tuck shop has followed Jamie Oliver.
No, and so I think that we need to be really proactive and do a bit of planning on that score. Yeah.
Keep your questions coming in. You can phone us on 1800 817 268. You can text us on 0408 408 932, and that'll do. Phone us or text us and we'll put your questions up, and if you phone us we'll put you on air. I interrupted you when you were taking my breakfast. I was salivating. Now go back to breakfast.
Well, we will actually talk about your breakfast. So your breakfast is actually quite large here. We've got 2 serves of bread, all the grains.
Yeah.
We've got a serve of legumes. So that legumes are actually quite an interesting
That's what you call baked
food.
beans these days, is it?
Yeah, sorry, baked beans is a form of legumes, sorry. So baked beans can fall into the vegetable category or into the meat and alternatives category. So it depends on whether you're
protein.
a vegetarian or not. So baked beans are a great source of
So is that a
protein.
serve of baked beans? I mean, what's that?
That is a half a cup of a serve. Yeah, so it's
Right.
a serve.
So if I was counting it as my veg, is that a serve of vegetables?
That would be your first serve for the day.
Right.
And then I've also... The tomato's a little bit undergrilled at the moment, but
Right.
the tomato, a grilled
But I'm into raw
tomato...
food.
Yeah, I know. I knew that, so
Yeah.
that's why I prepared it this way. So that would actually, already with your breakfast, you're getting 2 serves of vegetables, which is a fantastic start
But it's
to
got
the
to be a
day.
pretty large tomato to get the one serve.
Yeah, look, if it's a tiny tomato, it would
Yeah.
be half a serve.
It's not a cherry tomato.
Cherry tomato, you'd need several.
Right.
And we've also got a glass of milk beside it.
Right.
So
Very American. They're always drinking milk on, and it doesn't matter. Sorry, I'm interrupting. But so if and that's a low-fat milk, I take it.
that is a low-fat milk.
Right.
Yeah.
That is quite a big breakfast.
That is a big breakfast, and that will really help break your fast. So
Now, I can't help thinking about calories. Sorry, forgive me. So I'm looking at that, and it's what? That'll be about 130, 140 calories for the milk. It's probably 180 for the baked beans, probably about 200 for the bread. I mean, that's a reasonable calorie.
Honestly, I don't know the calories. I couldn't.
So you don't
work
care?
it
I
out.
shouldn't care.
Look, calories in certain foods are really important, and so with snack foods in the new dietary guidelines, they actually do have a limit on how many calories your snack food or its discretionary foods should actually contribute to your diet.
Because they're empty calories.
They're empty calories. These are nutritional calories, so you are
So these are doing some heavy lifting in my diet.
Yes.
Okay, fine.
And there's lots of protein in that too. So if you've just been to the gym, Norman,
Yeah.
you'll
And
be
those-
helping
The
you
gym.
out with that.
Who's Jim again?
And those calories are going to fill you up and stop you going for a chocolate bar for morning tea. So you're going to be ahead.
You're not convinced.
No, I'm 100% convinced. In fact, I've got to eat more for breakfast than I normally do. Because I mean, the reality, Caroline, is that the people who put on weight tend to eat most of the calories after the dark, don't they?
That's very true. So often what we see is that there's a pattern, and very often people will be skipping breakfast with this belief that they should try and tighten their calorie control. So they have this restrictive pattern in the mornings, they eat a reasonable lunch, and then afternoon they start getting hungry. By the time they've eaten dinner, they're so ravenous and they haven't eaten much during the day. They go gangbusters with dinner, they sit in front of the TV, then they have dessert and then another snack. So most of their calories will be consumed in the evenings. And I see that again and again. It's false economy to not try and pace it through the day.
And Amanda, the evidence from your 50,000 papers, if you pace it through the day, does that help you in the evening? You land better in the evening having paced it through the day?
Yeah, there's less evidence of that than there is around just avoiding the junk foods that people tend to snack on. So it's hard to say.
It's more what you don't eat during the day because you're not hungry.
But there's certainly an increasing amount of evidence that snacking during the day, and importantly having a good breakfast, is going to help you control your energy intake.
So what am I having mid-morning?
We've got an apple here for you. Okay, so even though you've actually had quite a large for you breakfast, having a snack just as you're starting to get hungry is a really good strategy to actually help control that hunger. So it will actually keep you going through to lunch, so that when lunchtime occurs, that you can actually maybe make a more healthy decision with what you're going to have for lunch, rather than trying to get that quick fix food.
Fiona, how long does it take for your appetite, coming back to my appetite now, to get under control? I mean, your appetite does readjust.
It does, and by reducing the amount in the evening of those snack foods, that can be a really good start, because often people aren't hungry for breakfast because they're still full from the night before. So if we can start to get the day's food evened out a bit, that's really going to help with getting your
peckishness
appetite.
occurs at the right time.
That's right, regularly throughout the day rather than all at one time, which then means you're full the next morning.
So what's for lunch?
Lunch, we've got some more serves of grains.
So that's this yummy looking roll in the middle.
This roll in the middle.
And I'll try to accept the carbohydrate around the side.
Yeah. Now I've actually put some lean beef in it,
Right.
so getting another serve of protein, or the meat food, so to help actually fill you up, and protein's good to keep you fueled for longer, keep your appetite under control.
Now I won't ask you to dissect the salad, but what's a serve of beef? A portion of beef?
In the dietary guidelines, it's a serve of beef is 65 grams, but it doesn't mean to
is
say
that
that
smaller than the palm of my hand?
that is smaller than your palm of your hand, but it doesn't mean to say that you have to only eat that amount, because there's allowances for multiple serves. Okay, so for yourself, there would be like 2.5 serves that you can spread throughout the day. So you can decide to put some with your lunch, and then maybe a larger portion with the evening meal.
Right. And there's cheese as well.
There is cheese as well, again to make sure that we're getting that full range of dairy foods in. So we've started the day with the milk, but then having some more dairy foods at lunchtime.
And milk's okay mixed with a bit of espresso, or that's all right?
Yeah, so long as you're not doing it too strong and not too often.
Okay. Won't talk any more about that. It's okay, you're picking up the ball now. Fiona, you're taking me after lunch.
Afternoon tea.
So there's some nuts here.
There are, so that's a 30-gram serving. That would be one serve from the meat or alternatives food group.
Right.
So it's
And does it matter what nuts? Because people get obsessed with almonds, walnuts, there's different shape, different fats inside them that have different benefits.
Yep, a good variety of nuts would be good. The main limitation would be just choose unsalted nuts.
And how they're prepared, because some are higher calorie and others are not supposed to talk about calories, but
Yeah. If you're getting a good variety, that's fine.
Right, and you don't worry too much about how they're prepared.
Well, we're having a small serving anyway. It's only 30 grams, the amount that's fitting there in the palm of your hand, so it's not going to make a great deal of difference.
So notice you've got it in a container there. The idea is that you don't have a big bag of nuts which you then just munch on. You have a pre-prepared packet of nuts, or small.
Or if you put it in your hand, put the packet back in the cupboard.
Sorry, to say that again.
Temptation.
Okay, I'll have to practice that.
They're so Moorish, aren't they? No?
They are.
Yeah, really hard.
Although I suppose if you're going to have a little more of something, that's a bit better than the chips or other things.
Okay, dinner.
Dinner. So I generally recommend to my clients that they use a plate, or they wouldn't have to use a plate like this, but use the proportions that are recommended on this plate. So a quarter of the plate would be lean meat, skinless chicken, or fish, or eggs, or protein food. So in the example here, we have chicken. 80 grams of chicken is one of the servings from the meat or alternatives food group, and you can see the skin's been removed there. A quarter of the plate we recommend to be low GI, or to be carbohydrate food. So in this case, we've got rice, and we've got brown rice for a bit of extra fibre. But it could be, instead of the rice, it could be pasta, or it could be potato, or it could be sweet potato. and half the plate we would like to be non-starchy vegetables. So, or it could be salad, non-starchy vegetables.
So the vegetable serves are actually quite substantial.
They are. So we're wanting to get at least 5 serves of vegetables a day. And half a cup of cooked vegetables is one of those serves. So it really is quite a lot. So if you just had the half a plate at dinner time, it's really not going to get to your 5 serves for the day.
So Amanda, what proportion of the Australian population actually have, I mean, these are substantial serves of vegetables and bigger than you think?
What would you guess?
20%?
No, it's not even 7%, Norman.
You're kidding?
No. And when you consider that the vegetables are associated with decreased risk of many different sorts of cancers, that's why the new dietary guidelines say eat plenty. They're the only foods we're saying eat plenty of, and we're saying eat plenty of vegetables of different colours and varieties, including the legumes, because you can cover off a whole range of protective factors that decrease our risk of cancer, as well as cardiovascular disease, including stroke, and as well as type 2 diabetes. So they're a bit of a wonder food, vegetables. And, you know, we've got 7% of the population, most of whom I think are probably dietitians or GPs that do manage
they're
to
not
eat
GPs,
that.
I can tell you that. David from Anna Bay wants to know, do the new guidelines include, good question, include age-specific guides, you know, for example, people with insulin resistance and diabetes, or pregnancy recommendations?
Yes, they do. The guidelines are designed for the walking well. So they're not for people that have got serious medical conditions. The problem is that we've got over 60% of Australian adults that are already overweight or obese. So it's overweight and obesity, even though it's associated with increased risk of serious medical conditions, now we're having to provide guidance for people who are overweight and obese, because it's most of us. But for older people and for pregnant women, it's the first time we've got dietary guidelines for pregnant and breastfeeding women. But there's different
and how do they
specific
vary?
guidelines. Well, do you know, Norman, the interesting thing is they don't vary a lot. Because for the main difference is how active people are, which means that they may need to have additional serves. As you get older, of course, your energy expenditure usually reduces, and it's even more important to eat very nutritious foods. And
So
what
make
we're
every calorie count.
That's yeah, and what we're worried about is as people get older, often they, you know, the worst case scenario is going to that situation where people have tea and biscuits, and in fact don't eat healthy foods, particularly people living alone. But there's increasing evidence that it's a really important time to eat more healthy than before.
And a text from one of our viewers asks, what about vegetarians, Caroline?
Look, I think it's interesting that vegetarians, you can have vegans and a plant-based diet, and certainly diets that are leaning that way have a lot of solid evidence that's building up in terms of prevention of risk factors like heart disease. But it does mean you've got to plan a lot more. It means that you've got to have a lot more of the legumes on board, and you've got to plan those through the day. I see a lot of vegetarians, particularly young vegetarians, who are just eating a lot of cheese and a lot of pasta. And they're actually missing out on valuable nutrients. They're often iron deficient. So you have to just pay a lot more attention to your diet. But you can certainly get all the nutrients you need from a vegetarian diet, and from a vegan point of view, as long as you supplement with something like B12, and most of the soy drinks will now be supplemented with B12, you can once again get a really good range of nutrition. You've just got to work a little harder at it.
There's actually vegetarian and vegan options within each of the 5 food groups, but it does take more planning.
And do you cover that in the guidelines?
We do cover that in the guidelines.
So you can get that online?
You can get that information online, yes.
Let's go to a case study. Matthew's a 35-year-old truck driver. He comes in to see you, Caroline, seeking help. He and his family are overweight. He explains that his reasons is that, you know, he's in the truck all the time, he doesn't get much exercise, he's eating rubbish at cafes the whole time, and you know, when he gets home, he wants to be nice to the kids and leave them watching in front of the telly. But, you know, he realises everybody's fat in the house and he wants to do something about it.
This is a really common scenario.
And he's taken a truck to drag him in, by the way.
Look, it's a really common scenario, and often I will say straight up to people that we need to treat it as a family issue. So I don't tend to single people out of the family and go, I'll just work with you. I go, we need to work with the whole family. Often we need to look at what they're drinking in terms of liquid calories. There are a lot of soft drinks, juices often going through the system.
And people think that fruit juice is good for them.
Yeah, and there's a myth about that. I'll often say to people, do you eat fruit? And they go, oh yeah, I have lots of fruit. And when we dig deep, they're actually having a lot of fruit juice. So they're getting a lot of sugar in one hit with no fibre. And I always say, eat the whole fruit and have a glass of water. But getting back to Matthew's scenario, it's also about eating as a family group and focusing on having dinner together and actually planning those meals. Often people will eat in front of the television, and families will eat in a fractured way. The kids will have something different to the adults, and they'll all eat at different times. So even just having a unified meal in the evenings, time to sort of spend time together with a group meal that you've planned, you often will plan for more nutrition.
Amanda, what would you do about him on the road? Because it's easy, just to pick up, something at a roadhouse.
That is really the convenient option, isn't it? But planning ahead, just like Carolyn was saying with the evening meal, it is about that pre-thinking, and often...
But I'm on the road for 2 days, non-stop.
So, an esky, thinking about food safety and making sure that your food is kept at the right temperature is really important. So a good quality esky with, your ice bricks to keep things cool, pack your sandwiches, pack your fruit, have your container of nuts, take your water, your thermos.
So just be ready. And I suppose the paradox is that if Matthew's grandfather had been a truck driver as well, he'd have been thin and probably taken his packed lunch with him.
Definitely. He wouldn't have had anywhere to stop along the way. He wouldn't have stopped for a coffee along the way like we do nowadays. So it would definitely be something that he would have to plan ahead and take the food.
Fiona, what about cost? Matthew's not flush.
Yeah.
And, and a burger and a takeaway burger joint, when you take the kids out, is cheap.
True, but when you look at it, it does add up by the time he and his wife and the 2 children have eaten. So they could prepare something at home much more cheaply than that. And even if they're looking
Is that right? Even fresh vegetables and so on? It just seems to be quite expensive when you go to the supermarket.
Even if they're wanting something convenient because they're not used to spending a lot of time cooking, they could get frozen vegetables, or even pre-prepared, chopped up, stir-fry vegetables are still going to be cheaper than eating out.
And you haven't lost the nutrients out of them?
You haven't lost the nutrients. You've got far more than you're getting out of the burger.
And there's a big myth about that, isn't there? A lot of my patients think vegetables must be fresh, not frozen, and and I say no, it's fine. Frozen, they're actually been frozen while they're fresh, and they're very convenient because you can just get little sachets and.
Yeah, whereas your limp carrot in the bottom of the fridge that's been sitting there for 2 weeks isn't fresh and doesn't have the nutrients that the frozen food does.
I have noticed the crunch seems to disappear.
Yeah, and even tin vegetables, particularly in rural and remote areas, so long as they're the ones that have got the lower salt in the brine, it can be really good options too.
So again, read the label.
Read the label.
So that's the answer for Matthew, and slow steps, just one thing at a time.
Slow steps. I'd also be encouraging him to have multiple breaks from his truck, just in terms of his own health, because I bet he's sitting there behind the wheel for possibly, we recommend fatigue breaks, but I think that you need to have movement breaks. There's no point just getting out of the truck and eating and drinking. You get out and you stretch your legs.
And just get moving. So Sarah is a single mother of 2 who lives in a small rural town. She works part-time but struggles financially. What can she do, Fiona?
I would tend to say to Sarah that the healthy foods are actually the cheaper foods. There's a program that was developed in Western Australia called the Food Sense program, and it looks at the cost of foods per kilo. And these days on the supermarket shelves, they will tell you the price per 100 grams, so you really can compare the cost of different foods. So if we look at our food groups, those foods really are quite economical. Those baked beans, they're extremely economical. Eggs are economical, so you don't need...
So eggs are okay, are they?
Eggs are okay. So 2 eggs would be 1 serving from the meat or alternatives food group. And things like your fruit is really cheap. It's unusual to find a fruit more than about $4 a kilo. Fruit roll-ups are $42 a kilo. So when we look at the food groups, the food that we're eating is really quite economical.
And you need to buy in season as well to make sure that you know what... seasonal fruit and vegetables will taste better.
But sometimes in country towns, particularly small country towns that are fairly remote, it's hard to get fresh stuff.
Definitely, but a lot of country towns are really innovative in that they have farmers markets and they do food swaps and bartering and things of their own products.
And there's always the frozen foods that you're talking
And
about.
there's the frozen fruits and the tin fruits.
And things on special, you know, particularly when it comes to meat and dairy foods, there's usually a choice that you can find that's cheaper.
And what do you recommend in the guidelines about the types of cut of meat and so on? Because some cuts are fattier than others, like lamb is a very fatty meat.
Yeah. Look, the only thing you can really control is cutting off that visible fat that you can see. Obviously, if you cut up steak, you know, removing the visible fat that's more the internal fat is going to be good. But the most important thing is to have those lean meats rather than have processed meats, like sausages or pre-made hamburgers where the fat is ingrained and it's very hard to remove that at all.
And thinking of slower cuts, with the cheaper cuts of meat, they require slower cooking time. So a moist, slow stew casserole can be really beneficial too. So that can be really helpful for the budget.
So
then you throw in the legumes and the vegetables as well. And
so you can just slow cook
meal.
it in the oven and come back to it an hour or so later.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good.
And adding things like adding a tin of beans to a casserole can really extend that protein component of the meal. And most Australians need to eat 4 times the amount of legumes of beans that we're actually eating. So it's a good way of getting
There's lots of headroom. We've got another text, this time from Tory, who asks, how can you be sure that what you buy in the store is actually organic, and is organic better? Fiona?
Supposedly, there's very strict regulations around the term organic. So if it's a packaged food, I would have to assume that if it said organic, it was organic. But I suppose if it was something you bought at the farmer's market or elsewhere, you just sort of hope that they were correct.
But
it gets very confusing though, doesn't it? Like I got some shampoo the other day, it said organic shampoo. Well, I don't want to eat that shampoo, so there's it's at least, well, I could, I suppose.
But your hair went green.
But, it's a term that's bandied around, and I think it's wonderful if we could have a world without all of those added chemicals, but the cost of organic food is also prohibitive for some families. So if you're encouraging them to eat whole foods, that might be the price.
But Amanda, there was that study which looked at the nutrient content of organic versus non-organic food, and there was not a shred of difference. Organic wasn't any better.
Yeah. So really it's not the nutrient in the food, it's more that the pesticides and the other residues that... But all foods are likely in some part of the food chain to have come into contact with things, which means gets back to food safety. We need to be washing our fruit and vegetables.
And if we're eating the fruit and veggies, we're getting important nutrients that help to fight off cancer or heart disease anyway. So you're getting much more important things from eating them than by avoiding them.
Yep. So Tory, save your money.
Yeah.
Or do what a Greek family I know does, is they just throw their vegetables in a pot of cold water and just let them sit there for a little while before they cook them. So
There's the Dietary Guidelines found no benefit in organic foods for health reasons, but people may want to do it for environmental sustainability or other reasons.
By the time you actually get to purchase your organic foods, they're more expensive, less people are buying them, so they can be in poorer condition.
And maybe more food miles as well, but we're not doing food miles. Jessica's a 24-year-old nurse who works long hours, lives in shared accommodation. She eats lots of takeaway and packet foods for convenience. And she says to you, Caroline, she's got no time to cook and feeds and feels generally tired and unwell.
Do you know, I have a patient who just fits that perfectly. I encourage them to think about planning their meals and to have stuff at home in the pantry and in the freezer that's ready to go for when they get home from long shifts, that they can easily assemble at low cost, that's high nutrition. So an example would be keeping in the freezer little sachets of frozen vegetables and little sachets of frozen fish. Simple meal, but to actually plan and also take their lunch. I find that when people are busy, if they take their lunch, they're pre-committing to a healthier choice at lunch. Whereas if they're on the run, they'll either skip lunch or they'll grab something on the run.
And don't eat the lunch at 11 a.m. hang on till 1. Pauline has emailed us to ask about dried fruit with nuts. Okay or not okay? Amanda?
Yeah, it depends on the portion.
Good for potassium. Dried apricots, really good for potassium.
Yeah. Now they can be problematic because they can be quite a condensed form of natural sugars that can stick to the teeth. So dentists will not like you eating a lot of dried fruits, but dried fruits can be a very convenient way of getting your fruit served. You just need to think of it as it was in the original form. So if you think of a dried apricot, you need to swell it up back to what a fresh apricot looks like.
Because it's like fruit juice, you can OD on the fruit.
You can OD, definitely. So you really need to think that it's only 10 sultanas is actually equivalent to roughly around a serve of fruit. So just be mindful of the portion, but definitely it can actually add to variety.
Okay, a text from Helen asks, what about, I was wondering how long this was going to take, what about the 2 fasting days per week diet? Caroline? I know my answer to this one. But
well, it's a really popular diet at the moment, and I think when people are actually striving for weight loss, for some people it works well to help them understand about hunger and portion size. Whether it's sustainable is another thing, but the idea for people who don't know about the 5-2 diet, it's that you eat you know what you normally eat on the 5 days, and then for 2 days of the week you really restrict your calorie intake
calories,
to about 500 calories. But it may be, it's not a useful long-term strategy in terms of the guidelines. In terms of getting people kick-started with their weight management, I think that it may be something which could be useful for some patients.
So there you are.
And I think we've really got to be careful about what people eat on those 5 days. It's not
it needs to be high nutrient food.
That's right.
It can't be sort of, a bit of a muffin for breakfast. And but it can also help. I've found people who've gone on it actually get in touch with portion size, and they realise that they can actually have much smaller meals. And that, from my perspective,
so they reach into their inner portion.
They reach into that inner portion and connect with their inner hunger. And that can be quite helpful.
Hunger again.
Well, a lot of people have lost that sense of hunger. They're eating so continually with snacks. You know, a lot of people don't go for more than about an hour and a half without something, a cup of milky coffee or a snack or whatever.
And there's a risk too with that they actually can reduce their metabolism. So fasting can actually slow your metabolism down. So it can actually potentially lead to long term that you actually may gain more weight in the future.
Right.
And we don't want to do that. We actually want to keep things. So the dietary guidelines really do assist with actually having regular foods, keeping your metabolism burning along so that you're then not at risk of actually regaining weight.
Shan has rung in to ask if the new guidelines have any special advice for the inactive thyroid. So somebody's got a low thyroid activity.
Yes.
What do the guidelines have any answers there?
No, they don't, because the guidelines are really about the walking well. So if there's a condition that you really would do better to get specific clinical advice, the dietary guidelines won't cover that. The good thing about the dietary guidelines is that that the patterns apply to a wide range of conditions, but you really need to get specific clinical advice if you've got a particular medical problem.
Caroline, do you want to comment on that?
Oh, I think that's really important, that dietitians and nutritionists do a wonderful job, and there's, within the Medicare system, if you have a chronic condition like a thyroid condition and you have what's called a healthcare plan, you can actually access 5 visits with a dietitian to help you sort out, if you're eligible, sort out your nutrition, and that can be really important.
And iodine would be a reasonable element in the diet anyway if you're taking a balanced diet.
Yeah, we've modelled all the nutrients that you have a recommended dietary intake for, and the type of dietary patterns that are prescribed cover all those nutrients except for iron in pregnant women. It's really hard to get enough iron from whole foods during pregnancy. And it might be just that the recommended intake is too high, and NHMRC are actually looking at that at the moment.
Brian has called to ask if there's a gene that makes Indigenous people more likely to have problems with their diet. And this is the feast or famine issue.
Look,
and it's a bit of a myth really about Aboriginal people, because we've all got the feast or famine gene. That's where the 5-2 diet, the 5 days and the 2 days off comes from, is that we were used to feast or famine, and we've all got it. That's why type 2 diabetes is so common in the non-Aboriginal community as well as the Aboriginal community.
but there are certain groups, around the world who are more at risk of having diabetes when they've got smaller tummy sizes. So certainly from an Indigenous point of view, they're in a very high risk group for developing diabetes. And we're yet to fully understand the connections there, but it's probably a combination of genes and environment. There's something switching those on and off. But they're a very high risk group in terms of developing chronic diseases like diabetes.
So I want to talk now about, so you've got all these dietary guidelines. We haven't even gone into my evening snack yet, but we'll just leave that.
You're not hungry.
If you want to know what I'm having in the evening, I'm having yogurt and a bowl of fruit. So there you go.
So there's so much there, you can't even talk about it.
I'm not hungry anymore. Let me tell you, they started off before in rehearsals with rubber and plastic food and insisted that we actually went to real food out here, so it is a bit more appetising. Implementing these guidelines, what do you do? I mean, how do we get into these if we're interested in pursuing them, Amanda?
Look, that's the real challenge, isn't it? You know, less than 5% of the Australian population know the guidelines exist, so we've really got to promote that they exist. It's not so much talking about the guidelines, but the messages that they have. So the National Health and Medical Research Council have this time developed a website, www.eatforhealth.gov.au, where you can find all sorts of resources. There's brochures, there's booklets. My favourite is the Educator Guide, so for health professionals out there that might want to make sense of quite the complex messages and know more about the evidence and the way that the guidelines were developed and the way that the recommendations were achieved, would be able to read that, and it'll help for planning diets of particular groups of different age and sex groups, and also people that may be vegan or want to follow a more Asian style diet. There's also information about the infant feeding guidelines, which I believe Carolyn will be covering soon. There's the guideline document itself. There's a summary booklet for people that may not want to read the whole 200 pages. And importantly, there's a lovely little gadget where you can go on and put in your age.
So this is online?
Online. Where you go in and put on your age and your sex and press a button, and it'll tell you exactly how many serves of all these different food groups you should have a day, and remind you to avoid eating the junk, which unfortunately makes up about 30% of what we're currently eating.
So if I'm not a dietitian or a doctor, which a lot of these are for, really go online, and that's
there's information for consumers and the general public. There's information for parents and carers about children, so it should be a one-stop shop. There's even fridge magnets. And
this was the famous plate. It was actually a fridge magnet.
It's actually a fridge magnet to remind people when they've got the munchies in the afternoon to grab a piece of, eat the fridge magnet. There's also even games for children on this website. I'd encourage them to go for a bit of a walk after they play the games.
Instead of nagging Caroline in the supermarket aisle. Yeah. So, look, I've been fascinated, and I'm no longer feeling hungry. What are your take-home messages, Amanda?
Oh, look, I just would be really urging people to be aware of all the evidence behind the dietary guidelines. Every day we pick up a newspaper and there's a new heading about a new wonder food or something, or a new study, just to help people to be aware that there's 50,000 papers that inform the evidence base about what we should be eating, so that they can use the dietary guidelines with confidence, is my message.
Fiona?
I would be hoping that after this evening, consumers would be realising that it is practical for them to be able to consume a healthy diet. Maybe they might need the frozen veggies, they might need the tinned fruit depending where they live, they might need some of these convenience options, but hopefully they'll start to implement some changes that will move their diet in a healthier direction, and they don't have to make all of these changes at once. Small, gradual changes can really add up to make big improvements in the long term.
Amanda?
I would suggest that everyone needs to go to the website, because the resources on the website, what Amanda was talking about before, with you can key in your age and your gender, it can be really personalised and quite simple. So the message is dietary guidelines are simple, but if you're getting confused and you actually need more additional help, go to your GP, go to your dietitian and actually get more help if you need to.
Well, we're going to Caroline.
Look, nutrition is a wonderful way for us to feel better and to allow us to live a longer, healthier life. So I think that it's really important to plan for your nutrition, and I always encourage my patients to increase their fruit and veg, if nothing else, because they're superfoods. And even if you can just increase the colour on your plate, as long as it's colour from whole foods, that you're off to a better start.
And Caroline West ends the programme, and Caroline will be back in a couple of weeks sitting in my chair, because I'm away for a few weeks, talking about infant feeding guidelines, which are part of these guidelines. So do join us in a couple of weeks' time, and I hope you found this programme in the Australian Dietary Guidelines informative and useful. And there's always more information available, and you can go to the Rural Health Education Foundation's website, which is rhef.com.au. Click on the programme page, Healthy Eating, Healthy Life, Eat for Health, Australian Dietary Guidelines. You can get a lot of the information, and you can even watch this programme again. Wouldn't that be fantastic? If you're a health professional, don't forget to complete your CPD evaluation form, which can be completed online. You'll receive a certificate of attendance and, if eligible, CPD points. And if you're just an ordinary member of the public, sorry, you don't get any continuous professional development, you just get a healthy diet. Our thanks to the Department of Health and Ageing for making this programme possible, but thanks to all of you for taking the time to watch, and for all those of you who contributed to our discussion today. We'd appreciate your feedback on the programme. Your comments are very important to us. Let us know you watched the programme by flicking us an email or a text, and feel free to share your views. We'd love to hear them. I'm Norman Swan. Goodbye for now, but join us again on the Rural Health Channel.